Improvement Pill here. Welcome to lesson 7 of the Tamed Course. In the previous lesson, we started learning about willpower, what it is and how it works. Prior to that, we covered a ton of very important stuff about habits. So if you haven't watched all of those videos yet, pause this video right now and click on the link in the description below. It will bring you to a playlist with all of the lessons of the Tamed Course in chronological order. In today's lesson, we're going to speak about what decreases our levels of willpower throughout the day. How can we avoid losing too much willpower? And how can we become more efficient with the way we spend our willpower so that we can avoid entering and staying in a state of ego depletion. For those of you that don't remember, ego depletion is a state we enter when our levels of willpower drop below a certain threshold. When we're in a state of ego depletion, our brain literally fires slower, and this causes a wide variety of problems. Most importantly, we become more impulsive, more emotional, and we have a harder time sticking to our good habits. So what causes our levels of willpower to drop? Well, it turns out there's actually a couple of things. So today we're going to speak about the 3 most common ways this happens. The first is mental processes. If I were to tell you to solve the following math problem, 5 times 5, it wouldn't take any willpower. This is because the answer, 25, almost automatically appears in your head. But if I told you to solve something like 134 times 54 using a pen and paper, that would consume some willpower. And this is because you would actually have to sit down and figure it out. When you have to think hard about how to do something, that drains your willpower. That's why even if you're working an office job that doesn't require any physical work, it's possible to become completely exhausted by the time you get home, because you've been using up your willpower throughout the day on mental processes to complete your work. So what can we do to reduce the amount of mental processes we do throughout the day? Well, the best thing to do is to find more efficient ways to get our work done. For example, nowadays we have calculators, so you don't have to rely on solving complicated math problems by hand. Or let's say you're working in an office and your job involves data entry. You could figure out a way to automate this process, figure out a way to create a program that automatically enters in the data for you. The second way we consume willpower is when we resist urges. If you recall, we spoke about a famous study in our previous lesson. The subjects who were told to resist their urges to eat the cookies in front of them had lower levels of willpower than their counterparts, who were allowed to eat whatever they wanted. When we actively fight our urges, this consumes willpower. I'm sure many of you have found yourself in the following situation. You're craving a cigarette or some junk food, but you tell yourself, no, I told myself I was going to quit. But the urge remains, and after about 30 minutes or an hour of actively fighting this urge, you give in to your temptations. The reason this happens is because you're depleting your willpower while resisting these urges. And remember, if your levels of willpower drop too low, you enter a state of ego depletion. Your impulses become stronger and you eventually give in. So what can we do about this? Well, there's 2 things you can do to avoid losing too much willpower while resisting your urges. The first is to change your environment. If you're feeling the urges to watch pornography when you're laying in bed, you need to get out of your room and do something else. It's very likely that being in your bed or your room combined with a certain time of day is the cue for this bad habit. If you do not change your environment, that cue will continue to prompt your bad habit. Your brain is going to say, hey, it's time to watch some porn over and over again. This is where the urge comes from. You don't feel urges for habits unless a cue is present. So instead of staying in, it's better to step out of the house and go to the gym. This does 2 things. It removes the cue so you don't have to deal with the urges, and it also allows you to start building a good habit that can eventually replace it. You could also leave your door open. If you're someone who likes to watch pornography with your door closed, a sense of privacy may be your cue. By leaving the doors open, you no longer have to deal with the cue. When it comes to changing your environment, it requires a lot of trial and error to see what works and what doesn't. The second way to avoid losing too much willpower when resisting your urges is to become extremely mindful of the urge itself. This may sound kind of woo-woo, but this is actually one of the most effective techniques out there when it comes to preventing relapse. In fact, a study found that subjects who used the following technique had more than 2 times the chance of overcoming their addiction than those who did not. So here's the technique. The next time you feel an urge, sit down and focus all of your attention on this urge. How does it feel? Where in your body do you feel it? Then think to yourself, I am feeling an urge to smoke a cigarette right now. Then think to yourself, I am currently thinking about feeling an urge right now. This is a form of meditation that's called mindfulness. Now you're probably wondering, why is this simple technique so effective? Well, think of it this way. When you get bit by a mosquito, it itches a little bit, kind of like an urge. If you decide to scratch it, or if you actively think to yourself, oh my god, I hate mosquitoes, my bite itches so much, guess what happens? The itch gets worse. But if you choose to ignore it and you don't scratch the itch, it disappears. And the same thing applies for your urges. If you just become mindful that you have an urge and you don't associate it with anything negative, simply observe that it's there, then it too will naturally disappear. The third and final way that our levels of willpower drop throughout the day is through something called decision fatigue. By simply making a choice, deciding which option to go with, deciding whether or not to do something, you consume some willpower. Marketers actually use this to their advantage all of the time. It's present in places like your local supermarket. Almost all supermarkets have their candies and small snacks up front, right next to the register. Why is that? Well, it's actually because when you're shopping, you're making a bunch of small decisions. Which brand of cereal should I get? What veggies am I going to eat this week? Which cut of steak is better? By the time you get to the register, you've already used up a decent sum of your willpower on dozens and dozens of small decisions. All of a sudden, you're on a slow-moving line with a bunch of tasty treats in front of you. You know you shouldn't buy that candy bar, but you feel impulsive because of your lowered levels of willpower, and you grab it. So how can we combat this? Well, a great way to prevent yourself from getting hit by too much decision fatigue, especially when it comes to shopping, is by making a list. Something like a list of groceries that you want to buy. So when you arrive at the supermarket, all you have to do is find the items and put it in your basket. And voila, no decision fatigue, which means enough willpower to say no to those snacks near the register. Decision fatigue is also present when you make a decision to do something. I've mentioned in previous videos that it actually takes more willpower to put on your shoes and leave your house to go to the gym than the actual workout itself. And this is because when you put on your shoes and you leave the house, you've made the decision to go to the gym. This seemingly small decision actually takes a tremendous amount of willpower. So what can we do about this? The first thing to do is to implement a trick called implementation intention. This is when you write down the time and place that you're going to do something. What this does is it removes the act of deciding. If you decide that you're going to the gym at 9 p.m. Wednesday, but you write out your implementation intention on Monday night, then your levels of willpower will not be affected come Wednesday. The next thing to do is to simply stick to your habit. It takes a tremendous amount of willpower to force yourself to go to the gym the first time, but this gradually decreases over time as you continue to go to the gym. And that's basically the philosophy of this course, to get you to stick to a habit enough times for it to hit that line of automaticity where it doesn't require much willpower. The final way that we can avoid this sort of decision fatigue is by learning how to enjoy the task. There's a reason why deciding to do tasks that we enjoy doesn't really drain our willpower, and it's because the decision has already been made. Our brain doesn't really have to decide whether or not it wants to eat a candy bar, it's almost always going to say yes. You can accomplish this same effect by convincing yourself that the habit you're trying to build is the best thing ever. Let's say, for example, that you want to hit the gym. If that's the case, then you should start watching videos of people talking about the benefits of hitting the gym. Surround yourself with proof that hitting the gym is the best thing ever. Subscribe to YouTube channels, Reddit forums about fitness, talk to people about fitness, put up posters in your room about fitness, and over time you start to believe that hitting the gym will make your life better in every way, that it's the best thing ever. And when this happens, going to the gym no longer becomes a hard decision to make. Our levels of willpower are consumed by mental processes which you can avoid by finding more efficient ways to get things done, resisting urges which you can avoid by changing your environment or becoming mindful of the urge itself, and decision fatigue which you can avoid by planning ahead with lists and implementation intention, sticking to your routines until they become habits, which means you don't even have to make a decision anymore, and convincing yourself that the habit you're trying to build is the best thing ever. By implementing these tips, you'll find yourself in a state of ego depletion significantly less. This will drastically decrease the amount of relapses you have while you're building your habit, but it's impossible to completely avoid the state of ego depletion. So the question remains, how do we recharge our levels of willpower so that even if we're in a state of ego depletion, we can get out of it? And that's the topic of our next lesson. The Tamed Course was brought to you for absolutely free with the help of the patrons of this channel. Each and every single dollar helps me continue to create this sort of content for free. All of my patrons receive perks and benefits which you can find out by checking out my Patreon page right here. Besides that, guys, stay tuned.